What's going on, everybody? Let's try that again. It's Bob's Three-Toed Warriors from Studio 1329 with Word on the Street, Season 1, Episode 16, titled, All Bets Are Off. That's because today I have Matthew Betz. It is pronounced Betz, correct?
It is.
Oh, good. Could have been Beats or something like that. I don't know. The E's are doubled with me to talk. So, Matthew, other than me messing with your name there, how's it going?
I'm doing great, man. Appreciate you having me on. I've been looking forward to this show. Ready to talk some injuries.
Love it. Yeah, injuries is kind of your deal, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, I am a board-certified orthopedic clinical specialist, physical therapist, which is a mouthful. Basically, I see these injuries that we're going to talk about in the clinic on a daily basis. So that's kind of my specialty, so to speak, in fantasy, and spend a lot of time writing about it and talking about it and all that good stuff. So I am ready to go tonight.
Awesome. We're going to go deep into that in just a minute here. I'm going to take a little sip of my unofficial sponsor, Mr. Vanilla Crown.
Come on, man. Sponsor the show.
I know, right? All right. So you can catch my podcast just about every platform out there. Don't forget to subscribe. Give me a 5-star rating. That'd be really kind of you. It's on YouTube as well. Where can they find you, sir?
Yeah, absolutely. Everyone can find me on social media at @TheFantasyPT. I write up the injury report section of the Fantasy Footballers Ultimate Draft Kit every year and do any kind of content for them as well, articles that are not injury related as well as injury content, and then host the Red Shirts Fantasy Football Podcast with Matt Okada and John Helmkamp.
That's awesome. So we're going to talk a little bit more about the Red Shirts pod. How'd you get involved with that? And you know what? I was sitting there and I was typing up our show doc, and I've seen the Red Shirt stuff off and on over the last year or so. We've chatted here and there about a thing or two. And I was like, what? Okay. And then I was sitting there, I'm like, oh, Red Shirts. I get it now. Injuries.
No, so actually this isn't even injury related, which is kind of ironic. So Red Shirts Fantasy Football started. This is our third season with the show and second season with the website. We started under the Fantasy Authorities umbrella as the Redraft podcast. Myself, Okada, Kent Wyrock, Jen Smith started the show a few years ago. And, we were just looking for more. We wanted our own platform. We wanted our own voice. We didn't want to be locked into just redraft. So we go year round. And basically we started as just a couple of guys that met writing together and said, let's just go do our own thing. And here we are. It's been awesome. The growth has been great. We just added John to the team earlier this offseason, which we're super, super excited about. Really happy to have him on board as well, hiring writers all the time. So things are taking off in a very big way, and we're super excited about it.
Okay, that's very cool. What days a week does the show drop? Is it once a week right now, twice, 3 times a week during the off season? How's that work?
We're going 3 right now, man.
Cool.
We're all in on the 2020 season.
That's awesome.
Hopefully,
better damn happen.
Yeah, hopefully it happens. We right now are dropping shows Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays from now through August.
Awesome. Okay, very cool. Yeah, we're gonna have a lot of dead shows if that season doesn't happen. A lot of people are just gonna pull their hair out. And
so much time wasted. It doesn't happen.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's do a really deep dive on just this player today for about 9 months.
Yeah, seriously.
Well, we get really detailed. That'd be kind of fun, I guess. Actually, when you think about it, never mind. I guess we got stuff to talk about. So you also said you do stuff for the Ballers. I love the Fantasy Footballers. But I've been listening to them since I started playing fantasy football a few years ago. I've enjoyed their Ultimate Draft Kit. For those of you who do draft with your spouse, that's what I was going to mention too before the show. For those who do draft with your spouse, if you're on the corner by them, don't give them the Ultimate Draft Kit sheets, the same ones you're using, because they'll just follow right along.
You learned from experience on that one?
Yes. My wife sniped me. All right. So how did you get involved with the Ballers? How's that look?
Yeah, so I started writing with them about 3 years ago. And really, like, at the time, there weren't a lot of people talking about injuries in fantasy football outside of ESPN Stephania Bell, who is the greatest to ever do it. And so I was like, hey, like, we need more of this in this industry. I wrote them, contacted them, and basically just explained, who I was and what I do. And they were all for it. And, ever since then, it's been awesome. There's other PTs that are doing what I'm doing, which is great. Medical doctors doing the exact same thing I'm doing. So I'm excited to see the injury knowledge out there. in the fantasy community because there was just so much misinformation previously. And I was listening to shows like, why is no one correcting these people? Like, we need more people to do that. So I reached out to them, and I guess the rest is history, so to speak.
Okay, I like it. I'm writing down a little note to myself because my memory is fantastic. So I'll just put bam. So they do seem like a good group of guys. Do you actually get to interact with them much, or how's that work?
Yeah, so our staff is, I think it's about 8 or 9 writers. We have a lead editor, and then the 3 guys, of course, as well as the production staff. And we all interact daily in our Slack channel. Good people, smart football minds, but even better people, honestly. So
that's cool.
It's been a blessing to join that team for sure.
Awesome. So we're going to cover some players, and we're going to talk injuries because all bets are off.
I love it.
We're going to talk some injuries because that's what you do. So I think that'd be great to have you on and highlight that stuff because it's a lot of fun. A lot of these names that we're going to talk about came from listeners. I put a question out there a week or so ago, and they just kept popping names at me, and I kept coming up with stupid puns because that's what I do. And so I have those. But before we get to those, I still have 3 spots to give away in my auction league for the listener league. So 2 of those spots are going to be drawn from listeners to give me a 5-star review on iTunes, screenshot it, and send it to me on Twitter at Bob's3Toad. The final spot will be given for the best plea, and creativity does count on why you deserve to be in the listener league. So I'm going to give you guys a couple weeks to knock that out, to be creative, to make stuff happen, and it has to include something about the show in it. So even if you have a great story, you got to work something to the show in it. Got to show me that you're actually a listener. And there we go. It's all clues I'm giving you guys, though. So, all right. Are you ready?
I'm as ready as I'll ever be.
All right. Here we go. Gronk, often injured, year off, shell of himself, or refreshed?
Yeah, this is tough. Gronk will never be the player he was. That's just kind of the reality of where we're at now. Is he going to be healthier than he was last time he was on a football field? Yeah, for sure. I truly believe that. But you look at his injury history, and it is quite lengthy. And the thing that really worries me the most with Gronk is the history of the back injuries. He's got at least 3 documented surgeries for his back going back to his college days. And so, over time, we see that tend to recur, especially as time goes by. And we've seen that recently with Gronk, most recently 2 years ago. So yeah, the time off definitely helps, no doubt about it. Will he hold up for a full 16-game season? I'm not sure. And honestly, I could see a scenario where, they say, okay, Gronk, we know where you're at in your career. We know you're not the dominant player you were 5 years ago, but can we just sub him in red zone packages and he can catch 8 touchdowns from Tom Brady? Yeah, probably. But I don't think he's going to be that every down type of player that we saw throughout his career to this point. So to answer your question, yes, he can still be effective. Is he the same guy? Probably not.
Okay. And I've heard a lot of them saying that they're going to use 12 personnel and get O.J. Howard out there with them, stuff like that. If they do that and Gronk is out there with Howard or Brate for that matter, is that imagine a good thing because you can have him in the block for a play and then send him out and be fresh and kind of, even though he's out there for back-to-back plays, he's still juiced up. That's probably a bad term.
I'm not sure about the juice stuff part, but yes, I get what you're saying. No, that's a great point, honestly. I mean, we knock Gronk on his production because in fantasy we care about that the most. But when you watch the tape, like the dude is still, as of 2 years ago, was still an elite blocking tight end. So I think that's a great call. I think he's going to be on the field to do some of that, which could help the run game for sure. And, just a side note too, like I haven't given up on O.J. Howard quite yet.
Right.
I'm not sure if that's a smart play or not, but sometimes you just get these players that you're like, I can't give up on him, man. He's just too talented. And I think Gronk being there could actually be good for O.J. Howard's career. So just kind of a little side note for that.
As long as he doesn't try and catch balls behind his back, he'll be fine.
Yeah.
Tight ends take time to develop too. So it's not surprising if O.J. Howard takes a little longer than us fantasy players want him to take, right? So before I go to the next 2 names, the question I wrote down a minute ago is and you don't have to say any players' names when you're answering this question, but do you feel a player is ever truly, in air quotes, here we go, injury prone?
Yeah, this is a question I get all the time.
Sure.
I don't believe that that's necessarily the case. And I want to say too, before I even like answer this fully, there are markers out there in certain people's genetic profile that have them predisposed to certain ligament injuries, so to speak, or metabolic injuries that you can't really predict. So in what we're talking about, to make it simple, we don't know that information. So you can't really say a player is or is not injury prone, but certain players are more prone to an additional injury. The most notable, hamstring injuries. We see it all the time. If you pick up a hamstring injury, you are more likely than someone else who has not had a hamstring injury to pick up another one. So yes and no. It goes with, I like to say basically players are more prone to a subsequent injury than a blanket statement of, so-and-so is injury prone, if that makes sense.
Sure. And without saying names, because I'm sure we'll cover some of these names later, is that also probably more true with a lot of your, as people love to say, soft tissue issues and things like that with the guys who have those kind of issues?
Yeah, that's
more frequently prone to have it again.
Yeah, especially in season. I mean, you look at the research is conclusive. There is no question mark about it. Players that have these soft tissue injuries, quad strain, hamstring strain, calf strain, those players in their first couple weeks back are almost do not play territory in fantasy, given the high risk of re-injury. We see the biggest risk in the first 2 weeks back on the field. So if they can kind of get over the hump out of the first few weeks to the first month, then maybe they're in the clear. But, we just see it year after year after year. And unfortunately, the data suggests that that's the truth.
Awesome. And that's good to know. I think we all feel it in the back of our minds. And I think a lot of players, when they're doing their drafts, it's like that tiebreaker. I don't know. I can't speak for a lot of players. I can speak for myself. And so if it's like, I'm afraid this guy's going to get hurt, and I think this guy's in the same tier, I'm going to take the guy with the little low risk rating, take that little less of a chance. And then it turns out that's the guy who randomly breaks his arm.
Yeah, of course.
All right. So let's have some fun and let's get some more names in here. How about Geis, baby? Or will he need some ice, baby?
This is easily my favorite one on the dock, I think.
Awesome.
Yeah, Darius Geis, it's just been so unfortunate. I feel for the guy. Comes in, super talented rookie, doesn't even get to play in an NFL regular season game, tears his ACL week 1 of the preseason in his left knee. Now, of course, this trajectory that he's been on is not good, has the infection in the knee. And when that happens, it basically prolongs the recovery process. And actually, if the infection's serious enough, can cause the ACL graft, the new ACL, to fail, and they have to go back in and redo the surgery. So fortunately for him, that did not happen, but it still had him delayed in his rehab. You want to strengthen right away, and you want to start the process as soon as possible. But with those types of situations, it's delayed by a few months. And so there was never a realistic scenario that Geis was going to be himself last year. I was warning everyone, do not draft this guy. 2020 is his year. And we saw it last year, right? Another injury, wasn't really himself, was banged up most of the year. But you're going to hear me say this, and it might be something that a lot of other people don't say. I feel like his meniscus injury in the opposite knee last year was kind of a blessing in disguise, so to speak, because with the ligament injury that he had previously with the ACL, it now gave him more time because he had to sit out to let that ACL truly kind of, take into the bone, so to speak. So, his risk of ACL re-injury this year is less than it was last year, which is a good news. But, you don't want to see a player just recurringly injured. So he's a guy that you could add an argument to both sides of the scale, and you'd probably be somewhere in the middle. So for Darius Geis, I think he's going to be healthy this year. I think he's going to be fine from a health perspective. But, does it matter? I'm not sure. Like, it's the Redskins. They've got 14 other running backs.
Yeah, they went running back crazy over the last couple of years.
Yeah.
To no avail, but...
For sure. And you just look at the data and the statistics that players that don't produce in their first and second year at the running back position rarely do anything in their NFL career. So if he hits this year, it's going to be an outlier. It's not going to be the norm. But certainly, I think his path to being on the field and staying healthy is probably in a committee role at this point in his career. So yeah, I think better days are ahead for Geis, but I'm not sure it matters for us in fantasy.
Sure. I feel like it was Geis that I saw a little Twitter clip of him getting after a workout and really those legs were flying and cutting and doing all kinds of fun stuff. I'm like, oh, I think that looks good. the non-doctor part of me is like, well, he's moving really fast.
Yeah, it helps too if you just watch it on like 1.5 speed. You're like, whoa, this dude is flying.
Right? Exactly. All right. Let's see. Well, that I was going to use it at a different. No, I can't do it. All right. Dalvin Cook. I didn't have a pun for this. I don't know how. Probably because I used the other one for someone else with a very similar name. Or anyone else who holds out. Effects on increased probability of injuries. So
yeah, that's a great question. This is one that I don't think we really truly have the answer to from a data-driven standpoint. And maybe this is a good research project for me to start working on here soon.
You're welcome.
Leave with homework. Thank you very much. I know what I'm doing after we hang up on the call. It makes sense from an anatomy and a physiology standpoint that if you are not in camp, you are not participating in football drills, you're going to be behind when it comes to other players who are there doing those things. So yes and no, again, it's kind of a gray zone, but certainly, it takes time to get into football shape. And you hear people say that, and I feel like everyone just dismisses it. People think that squatting 500 pounds or running fast does it. It doesn't. You have to get hit. You have to take on the grueling rigors of training camp in the NFL to get your body ready for the NFL season. So in some ways, yes, it is a bigger risk. And also it depends too on how long players hold out, right? We saw Melvin Gordon last year, probably the worst business decision ever, but held out and came back and looked slow on the field, right? So he didn't really get injured, but he definitely didn't look himself. So yes, there is some risk with that. No doubt about it.
Okay. I like it. I'm sneaking names down on my sheet of paper as we're going that aren't on the list just to mess with you. So,
oh, perfect.
So, and I believe that makes sense when you think about it. You're going to go run a marathon. You're going to run a 5K, whatever level your level is. For me, it's walking to the fridge and I'm tired, but whatever level that is, if you haven't been practicing it the same as everyone else, you're going to be behind. Your muscles aren't going to react the same. And it feels like a more opportunity for those issues of a hamstring or, something like that. So I could see it.
Yep.
So we're not drinking Coronas tonight, but coronavirus altered off season, additional risk of soft tissue or out of shape injuries type stuff. You see anything there?
This is a great point. It kind of leads into the same discussion, so to speak, as the holdout. But yeah, I mean, this year I feel like more than ever is more important to find someone that you trust in the fantasy space who knows what they're talking about from an injury perspective. Doesn't have to be me. It could be anyone out there who knows what they're talking about. But really, this is the year to get a leg up on your competition because there's people that are still out there saying Alshon's the one on the Eagles. I've been saying for 3 months, he's not going to be ready for week 1. So you need to have those people out there that know what they're talking about and kind of understand the recovery timeline for players coming back from injury, because by now we would have updates from OTAs, from rookie mini camps. We don't have any of that stuff. So that's kind of one part to that scenario. But the other thing too, it goes back to the football shape thing. I totally am hesitant this year. I think we're going to see more soft tissue injuries in the first month of the season than we've ever seen before because of the fact that we don't really know what training camp is going to be. We already know preseason is probably going to be shortened. So yes, it's a weird year, and I think we're going to see the effects of that on the football field.
I like it. Be prepared, people. Be prepared. You don't know what's coming. Commissioners, you better be really prepared.
Oh, yeah.
You might not even have a season or a half season. I've heard lots of great alternate options there, like playing double headers every day just to count in the season quicker, and it turns into best ball for the championship, all kinds of fun stuff. So
interesting.
Yeah, just different ideas, right? All right, so let's talk about some more specific players. Let's talk about Cooks and up some concussions.
Brandon Cooks, man, It's tough. He's had at least 5 documented in the NFL, and it really is a scary situation because we know through the research again that each time a player has a concussion, they are more likely to miss more games, miss more time, and the recovery process is longer. And we saw that last year with Brandon Cooks. We saw it last year with Sterling Shepard, who's kind of in the same boat. It's a scary situation. The tricky part is, though, in football, you can't really predict when it's going to happen. So it's an inherent risk for every player playing the sport. We know players that have the injury, though, are more likely to miss more time. So you kind of bake that into the risk when you draft him. But again, it's not like a player who's like Darius Slay last year where you're like, he's not going to be the same. Brandon Cooks could come out and smash and put up another 1,000-yard season and play 16 games. That could happen. But he could also get a concussion in week 3 and he's out for 2 months. So you just really don't know. But the risk is certainly there.
Sure. Absolutely. And every time he goes up to catch one of those high point balls and you're like, please don't undercut him. Please don't undercut him.
Yeah, seriously, man.
Not even getting hit in the head, but his head hitting the ground on every diving catch. And yeah. Please, no flipping into the end zone for fun.
Just walk right in.
Exactly. Just walk in and give the ball to the ref. So I saw this guy. He had some girly little knees.
Oh, Todd Gurley's knees.
Yeah,
man. I feel bad for Todd Gurley. Like he has been under the microscope for a year and a half now at this point.
Yeah.
And the reality is, it's not just Todd Gurley. Like every player that has an ACL injury and a surgery at some point in their life is going to get arthritis in their knee. It's just the reality of the situation. And some players, because of certain factors, whether it's workload or usage or previous injuries in the knee, whatever it is, are going to develop arthritis faster. And that's what we've seen with Todd Gurley. Now, he's still super young. And, the thing with arthritis is it doesn't know an age. So if he's had a lot of wear and tear on the knee and he's had surgery, he's more likely than someone else to develop it sooner. And that's what we've seen with Todd Gurley. And it just sucks because he's not really ever going to be the same from that knee perspective. He can strengthen all he wants. He can rehab all he wants. It's just not going to ever be the same. So Todd Gurley, it's tough. I think his best days in the NFL are behind him. No doubt about it. The advanced analytics show that on every single efficiency metric you look at from last year to previously. But he's going to a great offense. He's going to a situation where it's Quadri Allison, it's Brian Hill, it's Ito Smith. Like he's going to have every opportunity to lead that backfield in touches and in fantasy points. And obviously I think he will, but I wish he'd be in a scenario where he's going to touch the ball 12 to 15 times a game, not 25. I think if the Falcons try to do that, it's going to end quickly for Todd Gurley, and it's going to be poorly for your fantasy team. So it's risky. I think his ADP at last time I looked was like 4th round or something like that. And that just feels right for the risk, right? Like you could hit on Todd Gurley and be like, you know what? He stayed healthy. He scored 12 touchdowns again. Like that was sweet. And I got him in the 4th round. Or he could be irrelevant for fantasy. I mean, that is truly the range of outcomes here that we're looking at. But I don't know if your listeners play Dynasty. He's a guy that I would be looking to get out from at any cost, basically. Move on, get anything you can for him.
Sure. I really love the fact that you put some thought of into that, and it wasn't just a knee-jerk reaction.
There it is.
So you said that anyone who has an ACL surgery is more likely to get that arthritis. Really, what I heard was not if, but when.
Yep.
Is just for layman's medical understanding. Why is that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So basically when the ACL is torn, the knee joint goes through most times a buckling process. And when the bones kind of impact each other, there's usually an associated either meniscus injury or a bony impact injury of the femur and the tibia literally hitting into one another.
Okay.
And that creates a scenario inside the joint that accelerates the process of either cartilage damage, which basically is arthritis, and the traumatic process of the actual surgery itself. So, you're basically disrupting normal mechanics in the knee in a split second. And that creates a cascade of events that eventually leads to arthritis. Now, there's ways that you can slow down that progress, and there's ways to accelerate it. playing professional sports accelerates it for sure. If you have an ACL injury and you're 25 and you just say, okay, well, I'm not going to run anymore. I'll swim instead, or I'll bike instead. You're more likely to put that off. But what these guys are doing, what they're putting their bodies through, it's inevitable.
Yeah. A car crash every weekend, basically.
Pretty much.
Yeah. Okay. That's cool. So would you say, for this year or the next couple years, who would feel safer to you, Todd Gurley or Mr. David Johnson?
Oh, I love the Ballers reference there. Safety, well, it depends what you're looking for. If you're looking for safety in fantasy, none of the above.
Right.
If you're looking for safety in an injury perspective, I think it's David Johnson. I have been on record saying David Johnson was definitely injured last year. You look at the clip going around Twitter.
You're talking about after coming back from surgery or after coming back from injury, still, that's why everybody is kind of plotting, as everybody says, is because he was still playing hurt, basically. That's what you're saying?
Last year, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, the clip going around of David Johnson going to the left side of the line at a snail's pace has been out there everywhere, and everyone's seen it. And he was dealing with both an ankle and a back injury last season. Now, we have talked about it with Gronk. Back injuries can linger for sure. But if you're looking at a player for this season, I prefer David Johnson because I think he's more likely to hold up to a full workload. We talked about the concerns with Gurley and the workload. So, if you were going to tell me I can guarantee you one of these players is going to stay healthy this year and they both are going to get 12 touches, I'd say it's probably Gurley. But if you're going to tell me that they're both going to get 20, I'm going to go with David Johnson.
Got it. Cool. It's just one of those players that people are talking about, and they are talking about being so just totally fell off. I mean, he's like 2 years old. He really is. I mean, come on. All right. So how about this one? So, and you might not know, but is it too early to tell if he's healthy?
Mm-hmm. It is. It is too early. This is
so
one of those
for anyone who
situations.
didn't catch that silly pun in there, we're talking about Tua. I'm not going to say his last name. Ola.
Tagovailoa.
Thank you.
Yes, it is too early. It is too early to tell because this is a scenario where, if we were seeing what he was doing in rookie minicamps or what he was doing in OTAs, we would have a much better idea. Certainly, he is looking great from where he could have been. I mean, we're talking about potential hip replacement surgery, career over, and now we're just trying to preserve his quality of life. I mean, that's how serious his hip injury was. So, from that perspective, he looks awesome. And it's so great to see him on the field because he's such a great guy to root for. Anytime you hear him talk, he says good things. So I hope he can really come back. He's been a guy that, again, I've mentioned to people, it depends how you play Dynasty. If you're playing for 2 or 3 years, Tua is a great player to be on your roster. If you're trying to be like, I got the next Drew Brees that's going to play till he's 40, I'm sorry, it just won't happen for Tua because of the injury in the hip and the arthritis that is coming eventually for him. I think his best case scenario is sitting for a full season behind Ryan Fitzpatrick. I hope that's what happens for the Dolphins. Obviously, where they're not expected to compete for a championship or even a division title, let's be honest. So it doesn't really make much sense. And I think if they do that and they say, just rest, rehab, learn the NFL, learn the playbook, do what you got to do behind Fitz, I think he could be a steal next year because the talent's there. It's just a matter of really can he get full explosiveness back from that hip. And to be honest with you, learn to get rid of the football sooner so that he doesn't expose himself to more hits.
And I could totally see them just letting him do that. Let him sit behind Fitzpatrick, and Fitzpatrick is out there. Coach likes him anyway. The man likes to chuck the ball. They don't care. I mean, if he's doing really good, they're gonna keep letting him play anyway. And if they're doing really bad, they're like, well, let's save Tua and let's just ride out this season so we still win.
Yep.
And the only thing I see is that Fitzpatrick will run into a wall just because he can, and I think he gets a kick out of it. I'm just gonna take this hit for a 3-yard scramble, so I can see him getting knocked out, and then okay, all right, let's put in the backup. But hopefully, even then, they still have one, so they'll just let Tua sit. So, all right, here's one I thought up on the fly. Should we be Fournette and chilling on these soft tissue injuries?
Man, Leonard Fournette last year really was a value in fantasy. Give him credit, man. Stayed on the field, 16 games, touched the ball a ton.
Didn't get in trouble.
If he took the risk, didn't get in trouble, which is shocking because of how poorly that relationship looks to be on paper.
Yeah.
Last year I think was really best case scenario. Now, certainly if he touches the ball as much as he did last year, touchdown positive regression, or however you want to say that, is coming. He only scored 3. Yeah. But, there's still red flags with Leonard Fournette, and it does have to do with the injuries. Obviously, the hamstring injury from a couple years ago. He entered the NFL with an ankle injury that medical doctors who did surgery on the ankle termed as chronic. So, it's not like, it's just a low-grade mild ankle sprain that's going to go away in a month. This is probably going to be something that plagues him off and on throughout his career. So with Leonard Fournette, it all comes down to ADP for me if I'm going to draft him. If he's going like the 5th round or 6th round, then yes, jump in and take Leonard Fournette. But if he's going in your draft at like round 2 or early round 3, I'm probably out because of the risk there. So it really is all about ADP.
Yeah. I could see people reaching for him who went wide receiver, running back, or wide receiver, definitely wide receiver, running back, wide receiver late in the round instead of stacking up on running backs, because I think the run is going to be real this year. And so it's going to pull him up to that 3rd, 4th round. And I can see people reaching for him as that 1st or 2nd running back when they'd rather have him as that 3rd one. So
yeah, agreed.
Yeah. So since you kind of mentioned hamstrings, I put these 2 names together, but we'll break them out. Is the Hilton Fuller? So let's talk about Will Fuller since you mentioned hamstrings, because that seems to be his middle name.
Yeah, this is like the poster boy for.
And you could add
hamstrings.
Probably add Thielen in there because he's older in hamstrings, right?
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, so with Will Fuller, he's a guy that I just always have been saying you got to stay away from this dude in fantasy up until this year, and there's a reason why. So he's a player who, again, we talked about it at the start of the show. Players who have a certain injury in their history are more likely to have another injury compared to someone else. So the best way to predict injuries is look at the player's injury history and say, okay, you're more likely to get an ACL injury or a hamstring injury or whatever it is. And obviously that's the very simple version, but it often works. So with Will Fuller, yes, he is a risk for another hamstring injury, no question. The way he plays the position is speed. We see hamstring injuries happen with speed players more than anyone else because of the fact when you get up to that high-end sprinting motion, basically the hamstring is stretching as it's trying to work, and that's how injuries happen to muscles. So, certainly the risk is there, no question. But then the reason I'm more optimistic this year than I was last year is because he was a player who had an injury history that had hamstring injuries in it, combined with an ACL injury on top of it and a surgery the year prior. Now, coming off of an ACL injury, you're more likely to have a hamstring injury because of the compensation that happens, because your hamstrings and the ACL kind of work together to not let your shin kind of like slide forward in the knee joint, basically. So both those structures were kind of undergoing a healing process, so to speak. So really, I was telling people, I would be more surprised if Will Fuller didn't pick up a hamstring injury than did coming back last year. What do you know? The guy misses half the season. Now we have another injury removed from the hamstring injury and the ACL injury. So, yes, he's more likely to get one, but honestly, his ADP is not that bad for being Deshaun Watson's potential wide receiver 1. There's never been a year that I've ever owned Will Fuller. This might be the year, and I'm understanding too, just like everyone else, the risk is totally there. But like we talked about with Brandon Cooks, he could stay on the field for 14, 15, maybe 16 games. And to be Deshaun Watson's 1, I'll take a risk for that.
And on top of that, if he's your flex play or your bye week fill, trying to see real quick on a little fancy footballers rankings here where he sits. If you can pick him up to not be your main guy, why not take that shot for the guy? 40th consensus is what I'm reading for their wide receiver rankings. So 40th consensus alone puts you in the 4th round. Add in couple quarterbacks, couple tight ends, and a whole bunch of running backs in there. You're picking them up pretty late to take that nice little shot if you have a team that can afford the ups and the downs.
Yeah, totally. And he's going right now as the wide receiver 36
Okay.
According to Fantasy Football Calculator, just one spot ahead of Jerry Jeudy. Like, every day of the week.
Yeah,
I'll take a shot on Will Fuller over the rookie with Drew Lock. Yeah,
sure.
For sure.
Don't hate on my quarterback.
I had to look. Hey man, I saw your.
Did I just hit end on the show?
Me.
What just happened?
And we're done.
And that's right. All right, so that's cool. It's all good. So that's Fuller. Let's talk about Mr. T.Y. Hilton. He doesn't seem as bad. He just feels like he's had a lot of injuries, and you can put AJ Green in that realm too. Just one of those older wide receivers that are just hanging around and just nagging. Julio's more of a nagging guy, but
yeah, for T.Y. Hilton, I am pretty concerned about him this year, and the main reason why is because we see these muscle injuries increase the risk by 1.3 times every year the player gets older. So you factor in T.Y. Hilton now, I think age 30, he'll be 31 by the end of the year. Kind of the same category with Adam Thielen. The risk just goes up, and it seems to peak at about actually age 24 or 25, depending on the study you read. And then from there, it just gets worse every single year. So if you're looking at a rookie who picks up a hamstring strain, it's not great, but you're better off than someone that's 30 going into 31. So yeah, I'm kind of down on T.Y. Hilton this year. It's I think the poor mesh with Phillip Rivers' arm at this stage of his career, and T.Y. has always been a guy that kind of relied on explosive deep plays with Andrew Luck, and I don't think we'll really see that. So T.Y. Hilton to me is certainly not on my radar for fantasy.
So he's not going to be as lucky this year.
No.
Bad one. Okay.
Hey, without luck, man, he's got no luck.
All right. Yeah, another one for you here. I got Will Dissly rebound quickly. Will Dissly to be the early season beast he has been, or is he just a has been who never was?
Oh, Will Dissly, man, so tough to see. He now has two of the worst injuries you want to see in a player's history. Has the patellar tendon tear, then tears the Achilles in the opposite side. So now two major surgeries on both sides, each leg. And, last year alone was an outlier. Like, he should not have done what he did early in the season. So it was a shock. And then he tore the Achilles tendon. And again, that just kind of zaps your explosiveness. We see athletic testing measurements are way worse when you come back from that, especially in the first year. So yeah, Will Dissly, again, if he does anything of relevance this year, it will be an outlier. I will say, though, the caveat is Russell Wilson always does well with a tight end who just seems to be like under the radar, So whether it's Dissly or Jacob Hollister or Greg Olsen at the stage of his career, whoever it is, they might have some relevance in fantasy. It's just going to be tough, I think, to kind of see who that is, especially without a true offseason program.
Greg Olsen. Come on, with Dissly, you can outdo that.
Hey,
you can outdo that
so.
with one Achilles.
If not, I'd be very concerned about that.
And Olsen's probably gonna get his own injury in there. So, okay, I like it. So here's a question for you: when we talk about injuries, and you're coming into your draft, you're thinking, you're working on a trade, whatever, and if you are the kind of person that takes injury into account. Is there certain injuries? Well, I'm sure there are, but are there certain injuries, or what are the injuries that you find are more concerning? And what are the injuries that you find are, I don't care about that?
Yeah, that's a great question, because I feel like that's not what a lot of drafters focus on, and I think that's what they should be focusing on. One thing that I'd like to be able to put out for the industry in general is just like a cheat sheet basically for injuries. So like you look at the 10 most common NFL injuries and basically say, here's the re-injury risk. Here's the level of concern. And I think that's really what people need to understand more than this player versus that player versus that player, because it gets to be so much information to try to digest. That's a great point. I love this question. For me,
homework for you.
Yeah, seriously. I got to write this stuff down. For me, I am less concerned about a player recovering from a fracture than
David Johnson has broken
else.
Arm. Mostert exactly. Broken arm.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, that heals reliably time after time after time, as long as there's no infection, then you're good to go. And there really is no re-injury risk. I mean, it's totally fine.
Would you say, so I got a broken arm, he got a broken leg, would that weigh in for you? Or as long as they're both healed, you still don't care?
Yeah, as long as they're both healed, it doesn't truly matter. It depends on the location.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm trying to think of a good example.
I think the reason I asked that is because, to me, well, and there's the second part to this. So if I break my leg, that's the thing I'm using to run with, right? I'm also probably more prone to getting hit with the shoulder pads in the legs. I'm gonna my legs will be stuck in the ground as I'm getting hit by my body and twisted, things like that. So I didn't know if the bones were just more, brittle is the right word. When you take those kind of, after you've had a broken arm, if that bone heals more brittly or not. And I know there's definitely got to be a little psychology scare for those players that have had that particular body part broken and having it broken again as they're getting hit, like,
Yeah. No, that's actually a great point too. You know, that's a great question too, from like, you know, the arm versus like a finger versus like a toe or ankle or whatever it is. So yeah, for sure. If you have a surgery, let's say like, for example, Odell Beckham a couple years ago had the high ankle sprain plus the fractured fibula. You know, that's a part of your body that you're putting weight through and you're having to cut on at high velocity. So that's a great point. That matters versus like, oh, I fractured my forearm like Raheem Mostert. That doesn't necessarily matter. So that's a great point. Timeline really is what tells you whether it's safe or not. So a player who, you know, fractures their foot, Deebo Samuel, a couple of days ago at this point, you know, versus a player who fractured their foot in January, totally makes a huge difference. You know, you have a player now in January who has 9 months to get healthy and get on a football field and get confidence back and cut on that leg and do everything you have to do, versus Deebo, who's going to push the week 1 timeline as is,
right,
then have time to get confidence back and just get acclimated to football. It's a completely different conversation for sure. So yeah, those are great points. That definitely matters.
Awesome. So I think you put both of those questions in the same answer, both those answers in the same thing. So the broken bones, you're not too concerned about. The tissue stuff, the hamstrings, the stuff that has more wear and tear to it is more the concerning for you, because it's more likely to recur, whereas the broken bones aren't.
Yeah, definitely. 100%.
And concussions they're random, you know, unless you get knocked out in a bar. You probably don't get it. That's brutal. Sorry, it's probably too soon.
Hey, I'm an Eagles fan too, man.
So, you know, but until you get a concussion, you don't have a concussion. So it's like breaking an arm. It just happens. And then, of course, longer if you've had more of them maybe to come back. So any other good injuries that pop out that would be more or less likely that would be for a player that would be more concerning?
I'm trying to think. I think the general concept, like we have said multiple times, is just looking at what a player has gone through previously, you know. So I'm trying to think of a good example off the top of my head, but
I'd say neck and back are kind of annoying too.
Yeah, can be, depending on what's going on for sure. The other thing too to kind of consider is like the same body region always being injured. And, you know, the biggest one I can think of off the top of my head that was not this case or the scenario was Keenan Allen, right? For years, everyone said, don't draft him. He's so injury prone. But you just have to look at the history. It was, you know, a lacerated kidney. It was an ACL injury. It was a clavicle fracture. Like those just have no correlation whatsoever. But if you look at a player, for example, like a Darius Slay, like we talked about, or a Will Fuller, where it's always lower body, it's always knee or thigh related. Those regions matter. So that matters a lot for predicting a player's success on staying on the football field.
Okay. So
I think that's kind of the biggest takeaway as well, is just where are these injuries happening? Do they seem to make sense? If so, what's the re-injury risk? And if not, you know, let other people in your league be misinformed and pass on these guys, and you take that player and have success.
Sure. I like it a lot. So I'm going to throw in one other name I just thought of, which is also wraps into my next question, because a lot of people pick this guy as their quarterback that they can get late that has a lot of great potential. And that's everybody always wonders about Stafford's back. I was gonna say ribs, but I'm like, well, it wasn't really his ribs.
Yeah. Yeah. So with Matthew Stafford, you know, he is he is a guy who I am putting my faith in this year. People are worried about him, but these fractures that he had in his back last year were kind of in the middle part of the back. So like in between the shoulder blades is basically where this happened. The only reason this happens is because of direct contact. Now, what can happen with these injuries is you can have a fragment displaced. So basically, it's not in its normal anatomic position, which can cause an injury to the rib, or can cause an injury to the lung, or heaven forbid, a nerve coming out of your back, or any of that kind of stuff. And so if those things happen, then it's usually a bigger deal. But for Stafford, it really wasn't. It was basically just he needs time to let that bone heal. And now that we're almost a full season removed, entering week 1, that is, there is very, very, very minimal risk with Stafford this year. I'm drafting him everywhere possible. He's my favorite late round quarterback this year.
All right, yeah, a lot of people are ruining that option for me by talking about him so much, including myself. So whatever. So all right, well that's cool. Let's go on to my Ask All preseason question. So who is one quarterback, one running back, and one wide receiver that you can possibly see finishing in the top 5 at their position for the season, but you could draft them 13th or later at their position? So it's that steal. You kind of slept on a certain position, you can pick up a nice steal later. So in the draft.
Yeah, for sure. So
quarterback.
One of my favorite players we just talked about is Matthew Stafford, but you said everyone else has been saying that name. So I'm going to pivot and go to another late round quarterback that I absolutely love this year. It's Daniel Jones. He's going as quarterback 17 in drafts. And now I will say, I've been telling people, just be mindful of the early season schedule. It's tough to predict quarterbacks on a week-to-week basis because of the previous year's defensive stats. But on paper, it looks pretty scary. I will say, however, Daniel Jones flashed major upside last year. He had 4 top 2 finishes at the position as a rookie, playing in a Giants system that was kind of dysfunctional, and we don't really know, what his true ceiling is, because he didn't play a single game with Evan Ingram and Darius Slay and Golden Tate, and Sterling Shepard. He didn't have any of his weapons on the field at the same time together last year. Only played 4 games with all wide receivers. So he's just scratching the surface. And the thing I love most about Daniel Jones is he's playing for a team that has a terrible defense. And we want to target those quarterbacks in fantasy because of increased garbage time, because of increased scoring opportunities, all that kind of stuff. Exactly. Blake Bortles. And now we have Daniel Jones with all of his weapons, and he's a sneaky rusher of the football. His 16-game pace last year, if he would have started all 16 games, was just under 400 yards. There was only 4 quarterbacks to hit that mark last year in fantasy. The elite of the elite: Josh Allen, Kyler Murray, Lamar Jackson, and Deshaun Watson. So he's right there, and you're getting him at such a cheap price. I'm in on Daniel Jones this year. I've got him at quarterback 8 in my ranks.
Okay, I love it. Let's slide over to running back. And now for running back in the rankings you're using, are you going standard, half PPR, full PPR? And it doesn't matter which, it's your call. What are you using here, just so the people listening know?
Yes, this is PPR, full PPR.
Cool.
For running backs, which, certainly we want to target pass catching running backs.
Right.
And there's not a lot of names on this list that I'm looking at after pick 13 that I feel truly strong about saying this statement.
Okay.
But, there is a range of outcomes where Clyde EdwardsHelaire comes in and takes the job. He is a first-round pick. The data suggests that those players taken in the first round get on the field faster than players taken on day 2 or obviously even day 3. Damian Williams, to me, is fine for what he is, but Clyde EdwardsHelaire playing in the best offense in football, literally hand-selected by Pat Mahomes. I'm not ranking him in my top 5 by any means, but that's in the range of outcomes. So I'm more in than out on the rookie, and I think he is going to be a guy that fits perfectly with what Pat Mahomes and the Chiefs want to do. Yeah, he's a PPR back through and through, the best pass-catching running back in this class.
Yeah, and if you see the way that Mr. Kool-Aid Man took care of business with Tyreek Hill as a rookie and just getting him involved and getting him going, you do that with the running back, and you're like, all right, this guy is doing his thing. He's going to take the job pretty quickly if he can just work his way into the system quick enough. So
for sure.
Yeah, I like it. I went blank on his name, and so I said I went with, because he always wears those big red suits. I I literally have a name disease. I got to work on that. All right. And let's go to wide receiver.
Yeah, wide receiver, there are plenty of names that I would love to take after, what do you say, wide receiver 13?
Yeah.
That could finish inside the top 5. I'm going to circle DJ Moore going at the what is it, the second pick of the 4th round, the 15th wide receiver off the board, according to Fantasy Football Calculator. DJ Moore is a guy that I'm drafting everywhere possible. I mean, the situation is perfect. We saw him put up a fantastic season with Kyle Allen at quarterback last year. So to me, he's quarterback proof. And honestly, this Teddy Bridgewater as a game manager business is debatable. You know, he's kind of been pigeonholed into that role. But even if he is the point guard of this offense, so to speak, it's going to work. I mean, this defense was bottom 5 last year. They spent every single draft pick in the NFL draft on defensive players. They're going to be starting rookies. I mean, playing against the Falcons, playing against the Saints, like they're not going to stop anyone. The Bucks. There are going to be plenty of shootouts for the Panthers this year. I want all their pass catchers, especially DJ Moore, given his 4th round ADP. I have him ranked right now as my 7th wide receiver in PPR because he's going to catch a ton of footballs, he and Christian McCaffrey. The thing that I love most about Teddy Bridgewater this year is the system fit is perfect with Joe Brady's offense. We saw him run a lot of quick plays last year. They ran 72 plays per game in college. That would have ranked 1st in the NFL, and now he has a terrible defense. And oh, by the way, Joe Brady comes from New Orleans. Where did Teddy Bridgewater play last year? New Orleans.
So you sneak Teddy in as your quarterback then, huh?
Yeah. Hey, I don't think he has that kind of upside. I think he finishes, honestly, I've said this to my co-hosts. I was like, guys, there's a range of outcomes where he finishes with more fantasy points than Aaron Rodgers. Like,
yeah,
I'm so down on Aaron Rodgers
it's a good pick if you punted. So.
Yeah, for sure.
Did you have another wide receiver? It sounded like you were kind of checking out a few of them down there. Is there another one that popped off the page here, or do you just want to stick with DJ Moore?
I mean, DJ Moore is definitely my favorite of that bunch, but there's a couple of guys that I like a lot. The other one that I was going to bring up is DJ Chark.
Yeah.
He's a guy that I'm rising on a lot for the same reasons, right? Like, is Gardner Minshew the best quarterback in the league? No, of course not. But this defense is going to be bottom 5 for sure. They lose Jalen Ramsey. They have Yannick Ngakoue, who doesn't want to play for them anymore. Like, it is going to be, in shambles. It's going to be so bad. And we now have a new offensive coordinator in Jay Gruden, who we've seen rely more heavily on the pass in general. I think DJ Chark is an ascending talent, and all of his great games last year came with Gardner Minshew at the helm. So, you know, I love the draft costs on DJ Chark going as the 24th wide receiver. Nice. To me, there is no way he doesn't smash that ADP. So top 5 is less likely, but I think he's going to finish inside the top 15.
Yeah, for the price, it's not a bad thing. So Awesome. I bets on that.
Hey, I love it. Bets.
There you go. So subscribe right now because you're not going to want to miss the other great guests we're going to have coming on. We're not going to tell you who they are right now. It's a secret. But first, Matthew, remind everybody where they can find all your wonderful work.
Yeah, absolutely. Everyone can check me out on the Fantasy Footballers website with my articles there, the injury report section of the Ultimate Draft Kit. And then, of course, if you're looking for additional podcasts or any type of YouTube content, you can find the Red Shirts fantasy football content anywhere that you get your podcast.
That's fantastic. Thank you, sir. I absolutely appreciate having you on the show. You've been a fantastic guest. The information is amazing. I'm glad I got to send you away with 2 pieces of homework that you probably can't remember right now, but that's okay. I'll remind you after the show. Maybe.
Yeah, please.
We'll see. I can be found on Twitter at Bob's Three Toed, on YouTube at Bob's Three Toed Warriors, and listen to the new shows that drop on Monday and Thursday mornings on YouTube and everywhere podcasts can be found. That's all for this show. It's been Bob's Three Toed Warriors with Matthew Betz, reminding you that soon enough you'll be able to hit the waiver wire, set your lineups, dominate your opponents, and let's win some championships together, people. See you.